Hello again. So I'm going to talk about a verse from the section on self. And this is verse 163. So we jumped ahead. I'm only going to do, select verses from the Dhammapada. This one says, it's easy to do what is harmful to ourselves. What is helpful and good is hard to do. It's something I reflect on quite a lot because, I suppose because it's so true. Why is it harder to do what's good for ourselves? It's easy to do what is harmful to ourselves. Well, we get into habits, don't we? We get into habits of behaviour. And they obviously serve us in some way, otherwise we wouldn't do them. It's like with drinking. It might feel great while you're drinking. You might feel relaxed, more at ease with other people, able to be more yourself, or what you think of is yourself. It might help you be a bit more sociable and lively. But actually, the consequences are often not great, especially if you then come to rely on it and then you start maybe drinking at home where at one time you only drank with friends when you were going out. Now, maybe you have one at home because you're tired and things are a bit difficult and, it takes the edge off your awareness. That's what it does. It takes the edge off your awareness. Or, food. That can really get way out of hand, can't it? And, it's partly the culture and the times that we live in. I mean, you can buy food really cheap, and the more rubbish the food, the cheaper it is. So, of course, it's easy to, fill your basket with white bread and biscuits and all sorts of crappy old food. And, it takes a bit more thought and maybe a bit more cooking even to make decent food. So everything becomes easier on one hand and less healthy on another. So it is indeed much easier to just fall into, it's a sort of laziness. It's an apathy, isn't it? It's an apathy. It's like with meditation, sometimes it's really hard for people to find a way to get a regular meditation practice. They'll even say they don't have time, and yet they have time for all sorts of other things. You may have plenty of time to have a look at the internet and check your emails and be on social media, and yet maybe you haven't found yet time to meditate, which is going to be far, far, far more beneficial to you. But actually, facing oneself in meditation is not so easy, is it? It's not so easy. And also, we have to be entertained in order to feel like we're doing something good for ourselves. I was thinking about how people go to the gym to get fit, do all sorts of Pilates and all sorts of things, when actually they could be doing something much more natural. They could be outside, they could be going for a walk in the woods, they could be, having a walk with a friend while they talk. But in a way, we're sort of dragged away by all these things that are, they seduce us, don't they? They seduce us to think there's something wrong if we don't engage with them. So it's easy to do what is harmful to ourselves. What a shame. What a shame. And the only way we're going to overcome that is to really see the truth. The truth of, in particular, craving and aversion. How we're always wanting more, wanting something that we haven't got, or thinking somehow that we can make our life exactly how we want it. It's all about control, really, thinking we can control. And of course, nowadays, we can control so much that we can end up thinking we can control everything. So we have very high expectations, both of happiness and health, and therefore, we believe a lot of what we're told about how to accomplish that. How to continuously look good, look young, and avoid any kind of unhappiness. At the same time, we can often think that there's an easy way to accomplish that. When I was doing quite a lot of therapy with people, counselling people, and often they'd say, right, I've told you everything now. I've told you about my past. I've told you about all my difficulties and, who's responsible for them. So, what should I do? And it was very hard, I think, for people often to be able to take responsibility for their own mind, for what was going on. When things go wrong in our life, what is our part in it? What are we doing to maintain that situation? And, to face that truth takes a lot of courage. It might be we're in a really horrible relationship that we just don't feel we can get out of. And the longer we stay there, the longer the pull there is to stay there somehow. But actually, what we need to do is to, just be really courageous, to seek help, to get out of that situation. So, what does Buddhism have to offer? I can't stress meditation enough. If you're not going to meditate, actually, you're never really going to know your mind. You can't learn it from books. You can't change your life from a book. It's got to be from your own direct experience. And we have to be brave enough to let that experience in. And then, of course, there's lots of teachings of the Buddha, and I'll talk about some of those in future videos as well. So I've already talked a little bit about the 3 lakshanas, about these 3 marks of existence that we need to turn towards. We need to not avoid the fact of impermanence. And that impermanence means that there's pain in life. There's dukkha. There is unsatisfactoriness. I don't want to be an old woman. How did I get to be 71? How did that happen? I look at photos of me years ago and, it's like another life, isn't it? It's like another life. And I remember when I was younger thinking, I'm not going to look like that. I'm not. It does make me laugh now. I'm not going to look like that. I'll keep my body in shape But it happens. It happens. And you have no control. We have so little control over our body. I saw a clip the other day of, I'm not going to remember his name, Michael. He died, I think, in Greece while he was walking. And he'd done all these programs on how to look after your health. He was the epitome of somebody who did look after their health, who really cared, who did everything they could to extend their life. But he died, and he wasn't a great age. We actually never know. Believe it or not, people of 25 even have heart attacks. You might have something going on inside you that you don't know about. And we don't want to be frightened of that. We don't want to live in fear. But how we want to live is in reality, thinking to ourselves, it could happen. I must live today as if I don't know when I'm going to die. I want to be on good terms with everybody. I want to have done what I need to do. Don't build up a bucket list. Just live, Live and do what you need and want to do for yourself, but also for others. You know, that's very important. You know, when this has been looked into, I was trying to think of a word there and I've lost it. Investigations, no, that's not quite the right word. Never mind. This is one of the consequences of being 71. But, you know, when it's really looked at, you can see that actually you never know what will be happening. You can plan as much as you like, but you never can tell. You don't know what's going to be happening. Even tomorrow, you can't be sure. You can have a vague idea, but you can't be sure because you don't even know if you'll be alive. But why isn't that depressing? Well, it isn't depressing because it's freeing us. It frees us to feel more fully alive. You know, often we're just half asleep, kind of trotting through our lives on automatic pilot. We don't want to be on automatic pilot. You know, young children aren't on automatic pilot. They're very spontaneous. They know how to enjoy themselves. They're not overly self-conscious. At least most. And, you know, I'm talking about very young children when they're likely to do whatever they fancy doing. Whether it pleases you or not, you know, whether it's socially acceptable or not. Now, I'm not suggesting that we can do that. There are certain restraints on us, but we could be a lot more spontaneous than we actually are. And that would certainly be a lot more enjoyable if we could be a bit more spontaneous and creative. You know, try things out. You haven't got to be the best in the world at it. So, like, you know, I often think to myself, I'm quite good at doing a lot of things, and maybe none of them I do very well. You know, I'm not an expert in anything, but actually I'll have a go. You know, I love doing a bit of artwork. And I'm never going to be an artist, you know. It's nobody's ever going to buy my pictures, but I do enjoy it. And I enjoy it to such an extent that sometimes I can get a real kick out of just putting a line on paper with one of my oil pastels or my brush pens. You know, I just love colour. I love colour, you know, how to enjoy colour. Great. And I've often got little projects on the go. So, yeah. You know, I'm not expert at anything, but I'll have a go and I'll enjoy it. Recently, yeah, well, for years and years I've been making socks. I'm a bit of a mad sock maker because I don't like watching television and doing nothing else. It always feels a bit of a waste of time. Anyway, so I knit socks, and then with all the wool left over, I'll make a blanket. So, yeah, you know, these aren't going to change the world, but they are creative things. You know, they're things that we can create. And actually creating things is very rewarding. It is. What is helpful and good is hard to do. And I think the main reason it's hard to do is because we're selfish and we want an easy life. We all want an easy life. We don't want to have to put more effort in than we feel we want to, you know. Or we'll blow energy on something and then not have energy for anything else. So what does it mean to be good? What's good for us? Well, it's being outside of our limited experience. I'll say more about that in another video. So that's probably enough for today. It's a bit of a ramble. Some of these will be a ramble. But all I can say is they are based on what I've learnt throughout my life. So there we are. I'll see you again. Bye.